Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today, Write for Texas with Texthelp. My name is Kira Harakel, and I'm a member of the Texthelp marketing team, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. We have a great presentation lined up today, but before we get started, I just have a couple of housekeeping items. So today's session is going to be in listen-only mode, but we would love to hear from you and answer your questions. Throughout the session, feel free to type in the questions chat box of the GoToWebinar control panel. I'll be monitoring it throughout the session, and we'll have a couple of opportunities to address questions with the presenters, and I'll also do my best to reply to others directly in the chat box. So feel free to test out the chat box now, say hello, or let us know where you're joining from today. I also wanted to let you know that the session today will be recorded. You'll receive a follow-up email early next week with the link to the recording, as well as some additional resources. And if you'd like a copy of the slides to follow along with the presentation or take some notes, I'm just going to share right now the link to this slide deck, or you can type in the URL that's in the screen right now, which is text.help/write with Texthelp, and this is case sensitive. So let's get the session started. We have three amazing presenters with us today. First is Kasey Bell, who's a former middle school teacher turned award-winning digital learning consultant, international speaker, author, blogger, and podcaster with a Texas-sized passion for technology and learning. Kasey is the author of ShakeUpLearning blog and book, host of the ShakeUpLearning show podcast, and a co-host of the Google Teacher podcast. As a skillful facilitator, Google Certified Innovator, and Google Certified Trainer, Kasey has led a variety of digital learning workshops across the globe and helped thousands of educators to transform their classrooms. Joining Kasey is Jason Carroll, who is the Director of Product Management at Texthelp. Jason oversees the updates and releases to all of Texthelp's literacy and STEM solutions. Prior to Texthelp, Jason worked as an educational technology consultant in the state of Kentucky for nearly a decade. And last, but definitely not least, we have Kay Tapera, who is a regional sales director covering Texas and Oklahoma. She also holds a master in education, and before joining Texthelp, worked as a classroom teacher and tech coordinator. So you're in great hands today. And without further delay, I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to Jason.
Very good. Thank you, Kira. Hey, everyone. Jason here. Happy to be with you guys on a Friday. Everybody loves a Friday. So just a quick overview of what we're planning to cover today. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes making sure we're all on the same page, talking about the current state of writing. Then I'm going to hand that over to Kasey, and Kasey's going to show you guys, as she always does, all sorts of cool tools that you can use to support writing in the classroom. Then I'm going to do a brief demo of a couple of things, hand that back over to Kasey to talk a bit about assessing student writing and some of the challenges associated with that. I'll probably do a quick demo there as well. And then last, but again, certainly not least, going to hand that over to Kay to talk about some specific information to Texas. And then hopefully we will have time for some Q&A. But if at any time, if you have questions, as Kira mentioned, just pop them in that questions box. If we can't get to them immediately, we have access to those and who sent them, and we can always send up a follow-up email, just being cognizant of the amount of time we have here. So let's get things going. The kind of starting out with the state of writing. Unfortunately, and this comes from the nation's report card every couple of years, the nation goes, surveys each state, look at test scores, and only a quarter, actually, unfortunately, a little less than a quarter of grade 8 and 12 students are considered proficient in writing. That's a nationwide stat, but if you break it down to each individual state, it's not much better. And then not surprisingly, only a third of those students actually say that they enjoy writing. Makes sense, I suppose. If you're not good at it, you don't enjoy it. But we want to change that. And you know, the first question you ask is, well, why is this to start with? There are a couple of reasons that stick out for this. First of all, assessing writing is very subjective, right? So if I have a piece of writing and I hand that out to 10 teachers in a setting, you know, it's very possible that I'll get back 10 different scores for that assignment, because the way that we assess writing, it can be pretty subjective, which makes things challenging. On top of that, it's also known that there's very little training available on how we actually should assess writing. There's been study after study that shows this. One specific one looked at over 2,400 syllabi or syllabuses, depending on how you want to pronounce that, and showed little evidence of there being any classes in education programs that's devoted to teaching not only teaching writing, but specifically how do you assess writing. And the same thing, they looked, there's another study that's fairly recent where surveyed over 500 teachers. Less than half of them took any class that spent any time at all talking about how best to assess writing. So that leads, or at least it helps lead to some of the problems that we're having and some of the scores that we're seeing, not only on a national scale, but in Texas as well. So the good news is it's not all depressing. I like to start things off with a downside, and then it's only going to be up from here. And the good news is that technology can help, and that's what you're going to see today. So I've got one of my favorite slides here, and this is an oldie but goodie. Someone sent it to me a few years ago, and I think it's just great. It shows what technology can do. This is a student who's in the state of Illinois, and a middle school student, and this is kind of day one, right? This is a student's writing assignment. But then this is the after picture is what I'm getting ready to show you. 2 days later, the exact same student, and I mean, that's just crazy, right? That's a huge difference. And really, that was just from the use of technology. The student had the information in his head in this case, but it's just had a hard time getting those thoughts out on paper. Technology can help from that. How? Well, there's a lot of ways that can help, and that's what Kasey's going to show you here in a moment. For students, some of the things that we think about is text to speech, right? You can type some information, but then use text to speech to listen to it back and hear if what you meant to write, if that's actually what you wrote. Dictation, if you have trouble typing, you can just speak. Word prediction, we use word prediction every day on our phones when sending messages, but for some reason it's not used as much when we're in a Google or Word document typing. Same way with dictionaries, translating tools, editing tools, organization tools, how far we've come with spelling and grammar check. All of these tools are now available to students, and it really can make a drastic impact pretty much immediately in some cases. On the flip side of that, you have to think about technology for teachers. The key to helping students with writing is demonstrating good writing practices, but also giving really quick feedback. If a student writes a paper and turns it in and you can't get feedback back to them for 2 or 3 weeks, well, then any bad habits that they started with has become a permanent habit by that time, right? They say practice makes permanent. So the tools that we have embedded now in, for example, Google Docs or Microsoft Word for commenting, leaving voice notes, the idea of using rubrics so we're all on the same page, classroom management systems like Google Classroom that makes assigning students or assigning activities to students and getting that back quickly is a game changer. The same way with auto scoring, and I know some folks are a bigger fan than others on that, but again, it just came such a long way with how quick and accurate computers can help with some of the scoring things to help teachers get along with things a bit quicker and more efficient and spend time with students, helping them with the important things instead of all the tedious work that we're sometimes forced to do. So having said all that, this is where I'm going to turn it over to Kasey. And Kasey, I'm going to give the controls over to you. It just will take me a second here to figure that out. And Kasey, there you go. You should have that now. Super excited to hear from Kasey. I've known Kasey for many years, and we've done several presentations together actually now. So looking forward to hearing what she has to say here.
Hey y'all, I am excited to share some of my favorite tools to support writing. And it has to do with Google because I am a Google kind of gal. But I am so happy you joined us today. I know it is a Friday afternoon and everyone's busy, probably on the countdown to spring break and probably on the countdown to that test. So I know exactly what that feels like. And as I mentioned earlier, I am a former middle school teacher. I would say middle school survivor. I taught all 3 grades, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And I will tell you, I struggled the most with that 7th grade year because that was the year they tested writing. And it's not easy to teach, but I do feel like we have so many more tools at our disposal to do this and to do this well and to help all learners, whether they're struggling learners or we're just helping enrich and engage them in new ways. So let's get started with some spelling and grammar. So inside Google Docs, there is a spelling and grammar tool, and it's getting better. I don't know how many of you have used this, but I know most English teachers will complain about it because it's still not as robust as some of the other tools that are available. So you can turn that on just by going to Tools, Spelling and Grammar, and have it show those suggestions. But if you look at the example below, in Google Docs. This is a screenshot that I took, and it missed many mistakes. So it's still definitely not as robust as we had hoped, but we're definitely getting better. And that's why I like the Read and Write for Google Chrome edition, because they have the check it option. And so with check it, you're going to also see underlined in purple those words and those suggestions, so you can accept those or make those exceptions for anything in your writing. So seeing that comparison between those two really helps me understand the power in these tools. Now, I know a lot of teachers struggle with this, and is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? And I use these tools in my own writing every single day, and I write every single day, but I don't catch everything. And in fact, it helps me catch things that I do often. So I feel like these tools, while they are some things that the rest of us didn't learn how to write with, they are helping reinforce skills. So, if I see that comma splice over and over again, then that's going to help me remember that the next time that I'm writing as well. And y'all, please feel free to jump in the chat. We want to hear from you. So if you've tried any of these tools, what your preferences are, how you like to use the spelling and grammar check. The other thing in Google Docs for a writing teacher that I feel like is one of the biggest bangs for the buck is version history. And so I actually have an outline here from the Google Teacher podcast that I do with Matt Miller, and just showing you in the little animation here, when you go to File Version History, just there in your menu, and you see version history, it will show you exactly what happened in the document, and it will show you who did what when. It's time stamped. So when we look at this next slide here, we can drill down to exactly what happened on April 25th at 12:08. We can see exactly which changes Matt made, which changes Kasey made, and we see those highlighted and color-coded in the document. So as we transition to more collaborative learning, and collaborative writing is also a very powerful tool in the classroom, accountability is also really important. We want to know what each student contributed, and this gives me those talking points for when I have to talk to students, because I remember struggling sometimes with whether it was partner work or group work and students who weren't really pulling their weight. This gives us that opportunity to say, hey, Johnny, you wrote the word "the." That was your contribution. So what else do we need to talk about? The other thing you can do is name versions. So as a writing teacher, this is really powerful. I can go in and name my rough draft, and I can name the second draft and the final draft, so that they're all in one document and I can view them and see the changes that were made. I remember going home with stacks and stacks of papers. Sometimes they would stay in my car all week as I dreaded getting through those, but the red ink all up and down my arms, I'm writing these. And sometimes when I had students turn in their second draft, it was really difficult. I had to sit down at my desk with the rough draft right next to the second draft and look, did they just write bigger or smaller, or did they actually make changes? Because a lot of my students would really try to get by with making as little changes as possible. But inside Google Docs, we can see the writing process come to life. And I feel like this is such a powerful tool for all writing teachers to be able to see this. The other thing is, sometimes we need to go back. There are a lot of different reasons why we might want to restore earlier versions. First of all, sometimes things get deleted that we didn't mean to delete. And it's like you have a magic wand in your back pocket and you can just walk up and restore the version, and there it is, because it never failed when my kids were writing and typing their papers. And this was before Google Docs, so y'all probably know what we were using. They were typing their papers, and it never failed that I'd be walking around and somebody, "Miss, it's gone." And it really was gone. And a lot of times the autosave didn't work and the paper was really truly lost. And all I could say was, you got to start over. And it's terrible when you know they've been working hard. But this auto saves, if you didn't know this, Google Docs saves almost simultaneously, but it saves every few seconds. So you're less likely to lose everything that you have written unless you lose connection, but it doesn't let you type anymore if you lose your connection. So there is that option, but also the ability to restore. Sometimes our revisions are not always the better version of things. I know in my own writing, I go back sometimes and the first way I wrote it may actually be more effective than what I revised it to. So sometimes we need to go back and see those things. And you can also copy and paste from older versions into newer versions without having to restore the whole thing. And then this little gem right here, the ability to see new changes. So as teachers, yes, we have this window into their documents to see what they're doing, how they are evolving, what they're changing. But going into the version history of every single kid, especially if you've got 175 kids like I did, could be really difficult. However, we have new tools at our disposal, including this, where we can see new changes. So if you visit a collaborative document that has been changed since the last time you were there, you'll see that little pop-up and you can click and it will arrow through all of the changes that have been made since the last time you looked at it. So you can see that in a face-to-face environment without having to compare like I did rough draft to their second draft and being able to keep those all together. Okay, so let's review version history. See exactly what each student contributed, and that's accountability for our students. We can see if a student used their time wisely, because guess what? If we go into that timestamp and suddenly within 1 minute there are 5 new paragraphs, those were copied and pasted. And okay, all considerations, they could have written it somewhere else and pasted it in, but most likely they've copied it and they're plagiarizing. You can also restore those earlier versions if you need to, and as the teacher, you see the entire writing process in action, and I actually think seeing that piece is very powerful for students and not just teachers, to see it evolve and change in that one file. And as we continue to think about writing, and especially with our early writers, our emerging writers, our English language learners, we need some additional tools to help them start the writing process. You know, for some kiddos, the first few steps are the hardest, like how to start. And there's this wonderful tool in the Read and Write for Google Chrome toolbar that is called word prediction. And so you can see that I had just typed there once and I began writing up, and it's telling me what the next word might be. So it's making some predictions on what I'm writing about to help me better compose my sentences. So like I said, this can help the little ones, but this can also help the older ones, the ones who just struggle with writing. This can help our dyslexic learners, our dysgraphia students, in a lot of different ways. In fact, I probably need to be using this in my writing because sometimes I don't know what word comes next. The other thing I love is the ability to use the comments feature in Google Docs for both teacher feedback and peer feedback. And there are many different ways to do this. This is actually an old screenshot that I found years ago of a teacher who was using the highlighting tool as a way to leave different types of feedback. So he would highlight in one color, which would mean one thing, and highlight in another color to mean different things. But over to the right, you see those little bubbles, and those are the comments. And so being able to leave those comments as the teacher to give feedback, and as Jason mentioned earlier, how important feedback is to this process. And I think we all know that as teachers, feedback is so important, not just for writing, but for everything. So being able to bring that in and to have that instant feedback, and the fact that we can do this while they're still working. This doesn't have to be the stack of papers we went home with. This can be something that is ongoing as they are creating and composing. The other thing that I love is this little tip right here. If you didn't know it, you can actually tag a student in a comment. Just by typing the plus sign, begin typing their email address, and it will probably self-populate like it did in mine. And you have the option to assign. So there's a little checkbox that says assign to whatever their name is, and they will get a notification that they have been assigned a task as well. So that's a little reminder. You can see those both in Google Drive, and if email is enabled, they'll get an email that they have received a comment and if they've been assigned a task. So I like being able to do that. The other thing you'll see in that second little comment down below is a link. You can copy and paste links into comments, and that's great for giving those resource links and reminders. So yeah, maybe it's a comma splice, but Are the kids going to remember what a comma splice is? So give them that resource to go back and review that. And then I also really see a lot of power in using your own voice with comments. And the Read and Write for Google Chrome toolbar allows you to leave voice comments inside a doc. And it's super easy. You see the comment bubble in the toolbar and you have the microphone. You've got to give your microphone access in the doc. You click record and then it will embed that little play button into the comment bubble so that audio is there. And there is so much personalization that comes along with a voice that students need to hear from us. And in fact, I've been having this conversation a lot today about the possibility of schools closing and things due to the coronavirus, and using tools like this just to help students connect. So if you're doing blended learning or distance learning, this is also great too. But of course, helping them understand what they need to change in their writing. And if you're like me, I tend to be a little chatty. So sometimes I think I might take longer to leave voice comments, but I think for most people, this is actually a time saver as well. And here's a quick feedback strategy. So one thing that my students really struggled with was leaving constructive feedback for each other, for their peers. You know, I would get, oh, I like that sentence, or that's a cool word. Okay, let's find something else. So the tag strategy is just a great little structure to get started. T stands for tell the writer something you like. Of course, we want them to be more constructive and detailed than I like your sentence. Ask the writer a question is A, and G, give the writer a positive suggestion. So just an easy way to keep it positive and to get kids focusing on the right things when they are giving peer feedback. And the suggesting edits feature, oh, y'all, this is so powerful when you're not only leaving feedback for students and helping them understand how to rewrite a sentence or to rearrange a paragraph, but also for peers. So it was really hard for me to separate these tools between teacher and student because we are going to use these on both sides. And so you can see right there, I'm recommending that we change the word apps to the word forms because we're going to be more specific in this example, and it pops out as a comment. And so that comment will show that I am suggesting that that change be made to whoever else is in the document with me. So if that's my student, or if I'm in a collaborative document suggesting that we make that change as a group or a partner as a team. And then the little check mark and the X is where I choose to accept or reject the change. So whoever is in charge of that. So if you've never used this feature, if you look under your share button, there's a little pencil. And that pencil is the editing mode. And so most of the time that's the mode we're used to, but you actually have to enable this. You have to go in and turn on suggesting so that green line feature happens, but really powerful to help see the things, because when you're just using comments and you're trying to explain how to move something into an introductory phrase or rewriting a sentence, it's a little bit harder, but if you can show them, this makes it more visual. And oh yes, thank goodness for talk and type. So most of us talk faster than we type, although I bet there's some great typists out there. I think my typing skills are pretty good, but I can still talk pretty fast. So I actually was using this just yesterday, and I am writing and working on a new project. It's super secret right now, but I use the voice memo on my phone a lot when I have ideas, and sometimes I'm just dictating in there. And so I played this literally into Google Docs and had it dictate into my document. So this is a handy tool for all learners. Of course, those that struggle, the littles who don't know how to write a sentence yet, but they know how to say one. And of course, just helping us support all of the learning, because sometimes it's much easier to get our ideas out when we're talking than it is to just stare at the blank page. So I think this can help a lot in that getting started brainstorming phase and pre-writing phase as well. And then of course, this is a little tool that is built into the Read and Write for Google Chrome toolbar that Jason is going to show us in just a moment. So talk and type is great for students that can talk faster than they type, supports all types of learners, great for the littles who can't write yet, and of course supporting struggling writers, English language learners, all of the above. And this quick little screenshot here is where I am going to hand it over to Jason real quick. But again, we are looking at the dictionary tool that's also built into Read and Write, and how often we need to bring this up, not just the dictionary, but the picture dictionary, which can help, especially with those English language learners, as they are writing and making sure they're using the correct form of a word, or homonym confusions and things like that. So just being able to access that as they're writing, it's built in and it's super easy to use. So Jason is going to do a quick demo for you and show you exactly what that looks like. And that is if Kasey can remember how to change it over. And I think I did.
Just waiting for the.
Or did I give it to the right Jason?
Oh, nope, I've got it.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah, right. You see, yeah, you see my screen. Good.
Yes.
Thank you, Kasey. Very good. Super interested to know what the super duper secret project is that you're working on. So I look forward to learning more about that in the future, I guess. Okay, so Kasey mentioned several things with Read and Write. I'm just going to do kind of a quick demo of some of those. On the ones mostly, there's a lot of buttons in Read and Write and a lot of features there. So if I just pop over here to a Google Doc, so Read and Write, once installed, it really just has this handy little puzzle piece tab that kind of hangs down. It's what we like to call discoverable. And you know, if you're using EdTech in a classroom, and especially if you make the investment in that sort of stuff, you want students to be able to find it, and easy to find. You don't want to have to go dig into to find those sort of things. The great thing about Read and Write is it's always just there when you need it. So if I were to click the tab, it's going to launch the Read and Write toolbar, and it really just looks like it's part of Google Docs. I actually think a lot of people think that it is part of Google Docs. And once there, you're just going to have all kinds of features that's going to help with, as you'd expect, reading and writing and research and that sort of stuff. So to hit on the basics, the most often used feature is really text to speech. And to use that, I don't know if this is going to come through or not, but you guys can let me know, and if it doesn't, you'll at least get the idea. Right, so I don't know if it came through or not as far as the audio went, but you hopefully at least saw that it was kind of highlighting each word, and as it highlights each word, it'll read that out loud. And there's all sorts of different voices and languages and stuff like that that you can use. So if I go to my options, you can see the voice, dozens and dozens of different voices on there that you can use, different languages, all that sort of stuff to read the text aloud. And that was one of the things I mentioned first, in that you know, after you write something, just listening to it read back can often tell you if it sounds the way you'd like it to sound or not. It's probably a good practice for me to use before I send emails. And so past text to speech, thinking again about writing, and again, something Kasey mentioned, I just want to show it in practice, as word prediction. And the way word prediction works is you click the little prediction icon. That's meant to be a crystal ball. And you can type T, and you can see now I typed a capital T, so all the words start with a capital T. It really is just like using something similar on your phone. And then past that, you can see it predicts a word ahead. You can always turn that off if you don't want it to. But now I could even do something like type FO. And you see that even though I typed FO, it's predicting phone, which is the second option, with a PH. I think that's great for English language learners, students in general that are struggling with phonics. It's, you know, the English language is not that easy. Why F and PH make the same sound? Don't know who thought of that, but it is nice to be able to see if you type FO that you'll still get those other ones. And, you know, you can even use this in combination with other features. So if I wanted to turn on like the dictionary and the picture dictionary, move those things around, so I can hover over top of these words and it'll say it out loud, and it gives me a definition, and I can have the definition read aloud, and it gives me a picture to go along with it. So all sorts of tools in there that you can use to help understand and make sure you're using the right word. So that's word prediction, pretty handy. Now I'm showing you this in a Google Doc, right? But if I pop out and I'm in say a Google form, let's say you make a quiz and it's an open response, well, kids can use prediction in the Google form as well to help, because I know as far as accommodation goes, word prediction and the talk and type, speech input, dictation type features are also quite popular. Speaking of dictation, Kasey mentioned talk and type. We'll see if this works for me here. I'm just going to turn talk and type, or sorry, I'm going to turn prediction off, and I'm going to go over to my headset, which is talk and type. And if I turn this on, it's going to allow me to speak, and hopefully what I speak will pop up. This is me talking as I type, period. So very good. You see that that worked great. I can just close that out when I'm done. My daughter, Kasey, you mentioned 7th grade. My daughter is in 7th grade now, so lots of great fun writing assignments that she comes home with. It was 2 nights ago. She was working on some 5-paragraph essay, and I was getting ready to get onto her a bit because I kept hearing her talking, and I needed her to be working on her homework, not talking to friends. And when I walked in, it turned out she was just using talk and type to do her paper. So she typed her paper with her voice, so using talk as I type. So I thought that was interesting. The other thing I should probably mention that Kasey mentioned, I'm just got a separate doc for it, is Check It. So Check It is our spelling, punctuation, grammar tool. Kasey kind of talked about how it does pick a lot of things up. The reason it's so good is we're always adding to it. You can suggest, if you find something that we didn't catch, you can suggest that to us. We're always updating our rules. We have over 10,500 grammar rules that we observe whenever you're typing, in addition to like spelling dictionaries and all that sort of stuff. So you can see here, there are a few underlines already there because Google picks those up. If I were to turn on Check It, it's going to replace those with the purple underline from Read and Write, and it picks up a few things that Google doesn't, but it's just kind of a handy tool. So here you can see that I probably need to insert a comma. There you can see that that's just a misspelling, and I can change that if I would like. It does interesting things as well that I like to show. Like here it says, I left my suitcase in the train station for 5 hours. Well, that's the wrong version of 4, right? It should be FOR, but it doesn't know that because 5 is misspelled. Once that it knows that that's 5, so if I click on that, change it over to 5, okay, that's fixed. Now you can see it knows, and it's always observing as you're writing, so now I can go and it tells me that's the wrong version of 4. So it is something you can turn on, or students can turn on and use as they're typing. It is a really good grammar and spell check tool. So that's Check It. Everything that I'm showing you here in docs is going to work on the web as well. I'm just cognizant of time, and many times on the web, unless it's a online testing scenario, students are mainly using the reading tools. But if they have open response areas, they can definitely use prediction and talk and type, those sort of tools. I do want to just real quickly show you a PDF. I find this is one of the most underused features of Read and Write. If you have access to Read and Write, you also have access to Read and Write's PDF reader. On the PDF reader, basically, once you have it installed, you can open up a PDF from the web or from Google Drive, and it's just going to open with Read and Write's toolbar at the top of it. It looks a little bit different, but it's pretty much the same. You can have text read aloud. It even has, from a writing standpoint, like typewriter annotation tools. So imagine you have a worksheet in the classroom, you snap a picture of it, convert it over to a PDF, share that out through Google Classroom with students. Well, they can open it up. They can use the typewriter tool to put that up too high, sorry. They can use the typewriter tool to make a note, and you can adjust the font size and all that sort of stuff if you'd like. But you can, while you're typing, you can see that I can just type normally. I can have it read back to me. I can use the word prediction that we saw earlier. I can use talk and type that we saw earlier. I can change the font color. You can do all these things. So imagine just having worksheets that you can now make digital, which I think is half the battle. Then once it's digital, you can use the typewriter tool and use those features we looked at earlier to type there. Also, probably another thing I should mention is the commenting. Kasey mentioned commenting, and I mentioned the feedback and different strategies for commenting. Well, you can do threaded discussions in PDFs and use the tools that we discussed. Not only can you use, if I were to make a comment, not only can you use prediction and talk and type, but you can also create voice notes, which Kasey mentioned as well. So I could just record audio and put it in here to leave notes for students, or that students could use to explain themselves or have a conversation back and forth. You can also insert images and links and all that sort of stuff as well. So it really is a full-featured PDF reader with all the tools built in, and it's just part of Read and Write. I find it probably not used as much because it's a separate extension that you install, but it is still part of the Read and Write family that you have access to. So that is me showing Read and Write. Kasey, anything I should show them real quick before throwing it back over to you?
Sure, we can go ahead and do that.
Okay.
If that's easier.
Anything else I should have showed them there, you think, that sticks out?
No, I think you hit it.
Okay, perfect. Let me get this back over to you. A lot of back and forth here. There we go. To Kasey to talk about, kind of switching gears here, right, Kasey, a little bit to talking about now assessing digital writing.
Yes, I'm on the right slide, right? I think I am.
Yeah, you are. I see it.
Okay, just making sure. So now, as a teacher, when it comes to actually giving feedback and assessing the quality of that writing, it's really difficult. I know, as Jason said, there's not a lot of training out there. There's not a lot of resources about that. And because it's so subjective, it's really hard to find tools to help us do that. So some of the problems that you may be facing, I know that I faced in the classroom, it was time consuming. Many years that I had 175 students, and sometimes they were all turning in their papers on the same day, and there was no way I could turn those around in one day, and probably took me several days. And by the time I get it back, they had lost their entire train of thought. It stifled their creativity. It's totally subjective. I remember the first few years of teaching, realizing how subjective I was just in my own assessment, and having to go back to some of those first few papers to make comparisons to really see where I was going, even when I used a rubric. Feedback, again, sometimes it just takes really too long, and inconsistencies from teacher to teacher. So what I would grade as a 4, another teacher would grade as a 3, and it becomes really, really hard to know what we're doing is fair and equal and really giving students what they need. We have lack of training and resources on this as well, but there are some tools out there to help. We have rubrics, we've got digital rubrics, there's all kinds of rubrics out there. Now, whether they're good or not, I make no guarantees, but I do know there are a lot of different styles of rubrics. And of course, when we get into the testing phase, we're going to be using those rubrics. But when we're looking for, say, the single point rubric, we're just evaluating for that one skill, we have to think of the different types of resources we have available. So add-ons in Google Docs can superpower them for us. And one of the great rubric add-ons that I have found is called Orange Slice. It's out there. It's free to use. I believe there might be like a paid upgrade with it, but you can set up your rubric and you can use that inside Google Docs. There's also another one called Jozu Express that's very powerful. I see these used in spots, again, inconsistently, not necessarily helping all teachers do what they need to do. But we just got rubrics in Google Classroom, which I was really excited about. However, after going in and trying it, I'm a little less excited. If anybody else has tried it, please let me know what you think. But you have the ability to both create the rubric in Classroom and to use that in your grading workflow. So you can create the rubrics and upload them as well in Google Sheets, and there's a little template that you can use to do that, but it's definitely still a work in progress. It's a new feature and it's just not ready to go, and that's more time on the teacher to get this working, to get it going. Giving digital feedback through Docs and through Google Classroom, like I said, we've got comments, we've got suggesting edits, and in Google Classroom, we have that entire workflow now where we can open up the writing, we can click student to student, leave the feedback, leave the grade, and put that all in Google Classroom, which does save us a lot of clicks and a lot of time. But again, we're still assessing it. And I don't know about you, but sometimes staring at a paper is really hard, but staring at the computer and pages of essays can be really difficult, and it's hard on your eyes. It's hard to get through all of that. There are some additional add-ons you may want to try, like Doc Appender, which will let you use this to add information automatically at the bottom of a doc, so you could leave that feedback there. Lots of little tricks, lots of little band-aids and ways that we can do this, but none of these really help us see how fair we are being across the board and giving us a level playing field, class to class, teacher to teacher, student to student, and helping us understand. And so what's missing is a tool to help teachers assess, I just made up a new, help teachers assess, collect data, and save time. You know, we've got all this technology at our disposal. Why isn't it doing more for us? Well, I think Jason has a tool that you need to see. And let me tell you, I'm not being paid to do this webinar. I just believe in these tools. And also, when I show this tool in my own sessions, when I'm presenting at conferences, it's a mic drop moment. So Jason is about to wow you with what this can do. This is a writing teacher's dream. So I'm going to hand it back over to Jason and let him wow you with this tool called WriQ.
Right, okay, no pressure there, Kasey. Right, just waiting for it to show up.
Well, the audience has been super quiet.
All right, let's see what we have here. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, I forgot I'm using a document already scored here, which is, that's okay, it'll be fine. The, so, WriQ. I'm having a hard time doing two things at once here. So thank you, Kasey. So WriQ is our newest product, and Kasey's right. It's very good, and it's made to help with some of the things that we talked about there. And one of those is being able to quickly assess Google Docs, right? So what I'm going to do is hopefully be able to find my daughter's, let's see, dream or reality, Chloe Carroll. And here's Chloe's document that she shared with me. So basically with WriQ, I'll just show you here on the slides real quick. There are a couple of pieces to it. WriQ is a Chrome extension, and there is a student and a teacher experience that goes along with it. So it's a free tool for educators to use to score in Google Docs, and then of course there's like a premium side of it as well. But it's going to allow teachers to score student writing directly in Docs. It's going to take away all that time-consuming, tedious stuff that you have to do. You know, you don't have to log in to additional websites or remember other things. It just integrates right in with Google. It'll integrate in with Google Classroom as well. It's going to automatically score several writing indicators like the spelling and grammar. Some of the things we looked at and check it. It's going to automatically score those sort of things for you. It looks at the maturity of a student's writing. It looks at the amount of time they spent writing. It includes rubrics. So Texthelp has rubrics that ships with WriQ that covers different ages and different genres of writing, like narrative, informative, that sort of thing. And one of the nicest things is it allows you to track progress over time with the dashboard. Now, there's also a student version that was very recently released, and I'm going to try to pop over and show you that as well. Again, knowing that I only have 5 or 6 minutes here to get through this. So let's try to take a look and cross our fingers that that this works. I just did a demo right before I hopped on. It's been one of those kind of days. So if I turn on, if I open WriQ up, you'll see a few things. One, it's asking me to rescore a document, and I can tell you why it's doing that is because I previously scored this document. So Chloe, I'm putting grade 5, and I select and say, okay, well, this is narrative. And it basically shows me all the errors. It shows me all the spelling errors, grammar errors, punctuation errors. It gives me the word count. It gives me the vocabulary maturity age. So we basically look at every single word that is that's in a document, and we assign that what we call an age of acquisition score, which is roughly the age that the student acquires that. And over time, as you would expect, students' vocabulary matures. And so with WriQ, you'll actually be able to track that. Also, as I mentioned, it ships with rubrics. So in addition to finding all the errors in the document for you, here's a rubric. You can see it says grade 5 narrative. These are the ones that are built in. So in this specific genre and grade level, it's going to look at focus and setting, organization, narrative techniques, language. You can see below grade level, approaching grade level, at grade level, above grade level, pretty standard stuff. But if you wanted to expand that, you can, and it will go and give you a kind of a detailed explanation of what that means. So I could say, for example, that Chloe's on grade level here. I can say that she's approaching grade level on the organization and plot. The narrative technique, she did pretty well, and her language, I think also she did well as there. That may be a bit above grade level. I'll continue from there to the feedback side of things. On the feedback, I can enter in some feedback and say, hey, Chloe, keep an eye on those spelling errors. Whoop. Funny that I misspelled errors, as I was telling her to keep an eye on her spelling errors. And from there, you get a WriQ score. I can explain that to you in a bit more detail in just a moment. It gives you a breakdown of all the errors and the time on task, vocabulary age. It gives you a rubric score, all this sort of stuff. I can save that. Hey, it tells me, hey, the document's been scored. I can even insert some feedback if I want to. And what that does is it turns it into a green check mark. So next time I pop in, I can look and say, okay, I've already scored this document. But now if Chloe has went in and made some changes, it'll turn it yellow. And if it's yellow, then that means, hey, there's been some changes. It'll notify me and I can rescore the document like you saw me do just a moment ago. I hit the insert button. It allows me to insert that feedback right in the document if I want to. The student can also see this through the WriQ version or the WriQ kind of experience of the extension as well, but thought it'd be useful to see how you can just pop some quick feedback in there. Now, what I've showed you here, this is kind of the teacher experience on an individual doc. You open it up, you do a quick check and add in and catch all the grammar and punctuation errors. You can even go through and ignore errors if maybe pick something up that's a proper noun or like a student's name or something like that. That's very easy to ignore. But the important thing is after you score this, that's going to send that into your dashboard. Now on your dashboard, which I'll show here, we just go to the main screen here. This is kind of my demo dashboard. You can integrate in with Google Classroom so that you can see all your classes. Here are just some example classes, and you can see the averages for those classes. You can go and view the class. It shows you all the students in that class and their averages. Then you can even go down to each individual student in that class. Once you're there, you can see every document that you've ever scored for that student and their scores for that document. You can see their average rubric score and their average WriQ score. Now the WriQ score is really interesting and it does take a little bit of getting used to. But basically, we looked at all the metrics that we calculated and we worked with a researcher out of the University of Central Florida. And we basically are looking at like word count, these metrics, right? The vocabulary age, the maturity age that student types at, the pace, which is pretty much how fast they type, the accuracy, which is how well they type. We rolled that all into one number, and that's the WriQ score. You can look at it all separately, but if you want to put it all into one number, that would be the WriQ score. It's kind of like a Lexile level if you're familiar with reading. You know, like a Lexile may be 1170, and at first glance, you're like, what does that mean? But then after you get used to it, it's quite useful because we've had tens of thousands of documents scored, and we've been able to get a national norms set for writing using this WriQ score. That's something you just can't find anywhere else. So now I can look, and if I know that this student is in grade 10, I can go to this student's page in the dashboard. I can look at the WriQ score. I can have norms turned on where it says show norms, and I can see that when this student started, they were about at the 50th percentile, but then as they went on, Anthony here has really been improving. Now he's up between the 75th and 90th percentile, and that's for his grade across the nation as a whole. So it really is a good measure that you can look at to see how students are doing. And we can look at the same thing for vocabulary maturity, all that sort of stuff as well. Again, in this example, Anthony's doing great. We can also look at progress over time with accuracy. If we don't care about the norms, we can turn those off. Really, from a district level or a state level, you know, if you think about it at your school, you could even kind of develop your own localized norms as well after using WriQ for a bit and tracking these things. In addition to being able to score the student work quickly and accurately, tracking progress over time in the dashboard, you'll also see, if I go over to my personal dashboard here, that we have a rubrics section. So Kasey mentioned rubrics before, and I agree, Kasey, that the classroom rubrics just really aren't all there yet. There are some other great ones that we like. I always like Gubric. It's a little bit, you really got to put some effort into it, but once you do, it's a good solution. So we tried to make a dead simple way that you can just make your own rubrics with WriQ, and you can do that in the dashboard. You hit create rubric, you give it a title, you enter in what grades it's relevant for. You can add as many columns or rows as you want. We give you some starter text here to start with that looks kind of like the rubrics that I showed you earlier, the built-in ones. And basically you can add as many criteria as you want, as many grading areas as you want. You can edit these to make it say whatever you like. You can add all the explanation for why that criteria is at that level. You can give points assignments. You can do all this, and once you save it, you're done. Now you have access to that rubric in WriQ. And what's even cooler is we just added the ability for you to share that rubric with others in your school or district. So imagine that you already have a common set of rubrics. One teacher can go in, create the rubric, share that rubric with everyone else in the school or district. All the other teachers can import that, and now everyone's using the same rubric that was created by one teacher in a few minutes, and that takes away some of that subjectivity that we talked about earlier there with Kasey. So that's the teacher side of things. I just real quickly want to pop over and show you the student side of things. So I've got this self-driving car document that I was messing with earlier. You can see I tried voice typing there as well. But if I open up WriQ, and I'm just going to change over to the student version, and that'll take a minute. It'll have to refresh. And that's going to pop up if you see here what we call the WriQ meter. Now I'll be quick with this, but basically if you've ever used a Fitbit, that's where we got our kind of inspiration from. What I really like about a Fitbit, Kasey, I don't know if you wear a Fitbit or any kind of fitness tracker, but do you know what I really like about it is it just encourages me. It doesn't tell me everything I'm doing wrong. There's plenty of things out there that tell students the mistakes they're making. What I like about a Fitbit is it nudges me to, make good decisions. Get up every few minutes and walk around. After I get 10,000 steps, it celebrates and all that. But you know what it doesn't do? Like if I go out for dinner and have a cheeseburger and a beer, it doesn't give me a hard time about it, right? So using that same logic, we wanted to make something that motivates students to write, because the key to writing better is just to actually practice writing and write more. So the WriQ meter kind of does that. It tracks bursts is the main thing that it tracks, but it does all sorts of other stuff in the background as well. A writing burst has been around for some time now, but it's basically how many words do I write before I pause for a couple of seconds. And the research would indicate that as we progress as writers and become more fluent writers, that our average burst length increases. So if I start to type that sentence again that we always use, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. Hopefully you saw my writing burst got up to 9 words. I've paused for a couple of seconds. Now it's went down to 0. So it tells me that in this writing, I've had a total of 7 bursts. My best burst was 35 words. I've typed 4 keywords. So we have a list of basically loads of academic words, like key content area academic words in the background. And anytime a student uses one of those, we kind of just uptick the keyword number there. If a student wants to see more details, they can maximize the WriQ meter. Then they get a sidebar kind of similar to what you see with the teacher version of WriQ. And it tells them all about their stats for the day. It's got their writing burst and their average burst, total burst, keywords written. It even breaks it down into subject area. Now, I just have this one document, so it's all about science, and there's been only one science word in there, which is Tesla. But we can classify content. So as you write about content, we know, because we have a database with thousands and thousands of content-specific words, we know what you're writing about, whether it be English or science or math or some other subject area, and we can classify that for you and even put that in a word cloud. Students can go here. They can also see their progress for the week or the month or the year. Very soon, like within the next 2 weeks, we're going to be adding achievement badges. So again, think about a Fitbit. after you've achieved a certain amount of bursts, or after you've written a certain amount of keywords in science or math, you'll just earn little badges for that encourages you, and you can track those badges. You can also already view feedback. So if you get feedback, instead of inserting that big image at the top of the page, students can view feedback from within the WriQ extension and see a breakdown of rubrics and all that kind of stuff. So it really is a solution for students to help motivate and get quick feedback and just write more. And for this teachers, it makes them just makes it easier to assess documents, track progress over time. And we're even working on the administrator version of that dashboard, so an administrator can see how a school is doing, or how an individual grade is doing, or how an individual class is doing, and so on. So that's WriQ. I know we're running out of time here. I'm going to turn this over to Kay. Hopefully that helps, and anybody that has questions, I'm happy to answer those afterwards here. So
thanks, Jason.
You bet.
Go ahead.
I'm driving this, right, Kay?
Yes. If you'll just pop back over to the slide deck, what I'd like to do now is just give them a couple of little recent things that are going on in Texas. One is this Write for Texas initiative, which was professional development designed to help teachers provide opportunities for students for reading, writing, and discussing a variety of genres. This ran from about 2014 school year to 2017. And kind of in partnership with that, or along the same time, TEA launched the Texas Writing Pilot Program. It didn't include all districts, and it did not include all ESCs, but it came out of House Bill 1164, where TEA was basically exploring some alternative, authentic methods of assessing writing. So recent legislation, next slide for me, Jason, is House Bill 3906, which addresses the reading language arts redesign. And what this is saying is beginning, and this is really kind of hot off the press if you don't know about it, but beginning in 2021-22 school year, Texas is no longer going to have the star writing for just grades 4 and 7. So beginning this year, in the 2019-20 year, there's going to be field tested items across grades 3 through 8. Also may include the ELA 1, 2, and 3. But TEA's plan, from what I'm hearing, is to develop a way to authentically assess writing across all grade levels. And the TEA website says more info is coming in 2020. So lots of change coming for the star writing. And I hope you can see how Read and Write and WriQ are going to help you be ahead of this change. So what I'd like to go over next is our pricing model with you. We're going to start off with Read and Write. If you don't know, our licenses are sold by single, group, or district-wide unlimited licenses. Read and Write singles are $145 each. Those are great if you just need a couple of licenses. The group model has licenses, price drops to $12 a license, and we do have 150 license minimum. These licenses can be shared across schools in your district or domain. And then we have the unlimited model, which is great for all students and staff in your district domain. The cost is $1.80 per student for your K-12 enrollment. And for small schools, we do have a 350 license minimum. For large schools, we also start to offer discounts. A little bit more on that on the next slide. So single licenses for WriQ are $100 each. And again, they're great for a couple of licenses. Our group model, the price drops to $10 per license with that same 150 license minimum. And the unlimited domain for your district is $1 per student. And again, for small schools, we have the 350 license minimum. But we offer potential discounts when you're combining WriQ and Read and Write. We also have discounts if you already maybe have Read and Write, maybe you have Equatio and you would like to add WriQ. So when you add more than 2 products, we have additional discounting. And then if you're a district that's over 25,000 students and you're going to purchase for all students in your district, again, discounting available. So some next steps for you to consider are you can push out Read and Write and WriQ. Those are extensions where all students can have access to a 30-day trial. We're certainly happy to work with you on a district-wide pilot where you can opt in for 60 or 90 days and have all students and staff have access to our premium features. These would be great since we just saw a little snippet from Jason on Read and Write and WriQ, so why not trial it out here at the end of the school year while you're planning for next school year, I should say. You can check out our Texthelp YouTube channel where you can find free online videos. If you search for Texthelp, Read and Write, or WriQ, and you'll see our playlist. And again, we certainly didn't show you all the features of Read and Write or WriQ, so your regional rep is happy to schedule a webinar or a demo so that others in your school or district who might be interested can also see those features in Read and Write and or WriQ. And if you'd like to see how this pricing model applies specifically to your school or district, we're happy to provide a formal price quote. So let us know how we can help you. Kara, I think you're going to tell them what to expect next.
Yep, thanks so much, Kay. I believe that we already pretty much got to everybody's questions that were submitted through the chat box. And since we're running a little over, we'll probably just kind of wrap up the webinar right now. But just to kind of follow up on what Kay had mentioned, we're going to be sending out a survey right after the webinar ends, which basically will just have one question on it, just asking if you would like more information on a demo or a pilot or even a quote. So feel free to submit that after the webinar. And also, we'll be sending out a recording of the webinar probably at the beginning of next week. So just take a look out for that as well. And lastly, I would just like to say a huge thank you to Kasey and Jason and Kay for your presentation today. You guys just did an amazing job. And I want to say thank you to everybody for joining us on this Friday afternoon. And I hope everybody has an amazing rest of your day as well as your weekend. And thanks again, guys.
Happy spring break, everyone. Bye, guys.
Yeah. See you, ladies.
Thanks, y'all.